Hey there, everybody. This is John, and I'm a Mythic rating Assassination Rogue. He's currently 9 out of 10 Mythic, and I keep seeing these threads on competitive WoW, actually looking at an Assassination Rogue and looking at areas of an Assassination Rogue's logs where you can actually look and try and see potentially big improvements in terms of your play. So I'm analyzing my own log here today, and this video is basically here to try and help anybody who's actually trying to analyze their own playthrough and see where they can actually improve as a player in a raid scenario. So I've got here a fight from Star Augur Etrius Heroic. This is not necessarily the best or the worst fight to actually analyze. It was just one I picked basically somewhat at random. And it's actually probably one of the first things I actually want to talk to you about when actually looking at a log. If you're looking at a log, you'll want to be looking at a log which is giving the player the best scenario so that they can perform what they think is the most optimal rotation that they can. So fights with very little mechanics and that are basically single target are the best logs to actually look at, as this shows consistent rotation and consistent output, which is why you'd be looking at fights like Star Augur, Croesus, and Trilliax mainly. You can potentially look at Tichondrius, but you do have the phase in the middle with all the bats, which ruins your uptimes. So I would probably, in Nighthold, I'd recommend those three bosses instead. So yeah, that's the first step, basically, choosing an appropriate log to look at. And here you can actually see the damage done tab and the damage meter here. See all the various casts and their damage amounts. And I guess one thing I want to make clear, when you're actually analyzing a log, you want to be having this mindset where you're basically negating every single possible RNG element from this log and completely erasing it from your mind. And the reason this is because you're trying to have influence over your pull-by-pull basis scenarios in a raid. You have no real influence over your RNG on a pull-by-pull basis. For an Assassination Rogue, there's a varied amount of RNG. So with this class, for example, you have Poison Bomb is probably your number one RNG element, especially with that mastery. This is going to deal a huge amount of damage and is going to influence your log a lot. And there's nothing you can do. So long as you're casting 4 or 5 combo point Envenoms, there's nothing you can do about Poison Bomb. The next thing is Bloodily Assassinated. Again, nothing you can do. That's just extra rupture damage. You get Seal Fate. Seal Fate is critical strike randomness, unless you have the Mantle Shoulders, where it's somewhat less random. Inside that is obviously less random. Inside that, you know what you're getting, but outside of that window, it's random again. Also, again, you've got other elements, such as your trinkets. So in this case, it would be Recursive Strikes. This is from Night Blooming Frond. And obviously, this is a big RNG element that you have very, very little influence over, so long as you're auto-attacking. So, getting these elements and basically completely removing them from your mind and completely disregarding them is your number one priority. Once you've done that, you can actually get into what things you can influence. So what can you influence with an Assassination Rogue? The number one thing you can influence is your uptime percentage, which you can see on the tab here. You can see for various abilities such as Rupture, Kingsbane, Garrot, and Mutilated Flesh, which is your, I believe it's your 2-piece in tier 19. And the main things to actually look at are Garrot and Rupture, and somewhat Kingsbane in 7.2, however not so much still. You're mainly looking at Rupture and Garrot. The reason you're looking at these mainly is because not only would a higher uptime give you just straight up more damage, because you've got Rupture on it, for longer periods of time, but it also means that your energy regen is going to be higher as they're going to be on a poison target, which means that you gain the effect of Venomous Wounds, more energy, more Envenom casts, more damage. It's very simple. So keeping this as close to 100% as possible is your main goal. Again, the same with Garrot. Kingsbane with 7.2 gives you Sinister Circulation so long as you got 42 traits. Then that means that Kingsbane is going to be coming off cooldown much shorter, which basically means you're going to get more casts of Kingsbane off for a given fight. It's very similar to Vendetta and the Master Assassin trait. I'm going to briefly touch upon the summary tab here. If you're a guild officer or a guild GM, or potentially a raid leader even, you want to be potentially looking at these types of things, so I'll just quickly run through this. You can see the player stats here. Player stats, somewhat important. If your gear is poorly optimized, you're going to see lower damage output, but again, that's not really indicative of skill or player ability. It's mainly due to what gear you have, right? So if you've got a low mastery, you're going to see quite low damage. If you've got a lot of haste, you're going to see quite low damage. Crit, you want it to a reasonable amount, as it just makes the performance just more fluid to play. And verse, you're going to have a bit here and there. Ideally, you want this haste to be as low as possible, your mastery to be as high as possible, your crit and verse, you want it to be a reasonable amount. Something along the lines of this is not really out of the ordinary, and you're obviously, unless you're incredibly lucky, you're going to have some haste, but you want to try and mitigate that as much as possible. Player talents, again, another important factor. In a pure single target fight, this is generally what you want to be taking for a given scenario. The main things to be taking are Master Poisoner, Night Stalker, Vigor, Agonizing Poison, and Venom Rush. The Cheat Death and the Thug. Basically, up to you which one you take. Those are just kind of the default ones you actually normally take. These affect quite a lot, mainly the scaling with mastery, which is why you want high mastery to begin with. But yeah, so player artifact, again, another important thing to look at. Player artifact is important because of Sinister Circulation, like I mentioned before, and also your Master Assassin, and seeing where those relics are actually coming into play. So I don't have full Master Assassin yet, since 7.2 just hit. So I've got 5, which means I've got 2 relics at the moment that are Master Assassin. As soon as I get that point in Master Assassin, I'm going to go up to 6, which would still be 2 relic points. But that's important to actually note, again, because it affects the log from a how many times you're going to be casting Vendetta perspective. Another big thing that's going to influence your log and your performance and how it affects your rotation are going to be your legendaries. In this case, I've got Mantle of the Master Assassin and the Duskwalker Footpads. This is going to affect, again, in terms of Vendetta cooldown reduction, as well as my crit strike, which is going to influence things like my opener and my general burst phase windows. Now, these are going to change depending on which legendary you're going to have, and I'll probably do a separate video to actually cover that kind of element. But for now, I just want to give a general overview, so I won't mention in detail legendary differences from a log-by-log basis. Again, you can check the gems and relics and enchants, make sure they're okay. But apart from that, that's about it for summary. So if you're doing your own log, you don't need to touch that tab whatsoever. But if you're a GM or an officer who wants to check on a player, then definitely check out summary before you even begin looking at the damage done tab. Okay. Next up, we're going to actually look and see one element, which I just talked about, was the uptime percentage. However, that's not the only element when you're looking at an assassination rogue. Another big thing to look at is the resources tab. Now, in the resources tab, you're able to actually see, would you believe it, everybody's resources. So the main things to be looking at are energy and combo points. If we look at energy to begin with, energy is an important thing to look at for one particular purpose, and that is energy capping. If a player is energy capping, they're at the cap, right? And that's bad. And the reason that's bad is because you're not generating any energy if you're sitting at that energy cap, which means that there's a massive DPS loss. And you'll be able to see this in the graph. I hit the energy cap at a few points here, around here, and, here and here. But it's okay. Hitting that cap is okay, so long as it's only for a brief split second. If you're lasting, or if you're flatlining at the top, then that's incredibly bad. and especially if it's for a sustained period of time you're at that cap, because that is potential energy you're just flat out losing, and it's just a massive DPS loss. So if you see that in a log, that's a big red flag that you want to just be like, oh, you need to be doing something at this point. You need to be casting something to make sure your energy is going down. That's the main thing you want to be taking from this tab. So let's move on to combo points. Combo points gets a bit more in depth. You'll see this kind of up and down pattern in the graph here, which is generally normal. You want to be seeing that kind of 4 to 5 CP drop, usually. So you see that 4, you got 4 drop, 5 drop, 5 drop, 4 drop, that kind of thing. You don't really want to be seeing someone drop at 3, say, 3 or 2. Anything like that is a big giveaway, and that they're doing something wrong. But so long as they're at like the kind of 4 or 5 region, then you know you're okay. The next thing you want to be taking from this tab is raw gain, wasted, and gain. And you've got various abilities here that actually have the raw gain, wasted, and gain on them. What this means is you have your raw gain over here. That's the maximum potential that you could have had during that entire fight. That means that I had 152 potential mutilate CP. Wasted, I wasted 1. That means that the overall gain that I had in the fight was the raw gain minus the wasted, giving me 151, which is what I actually received in the fight. This wasted is dependent on talent, of course, with Vigor. That means that I have 5 combo points, which means that anything over that 5 combo points is essentially the wasted tab. So say if I mutilated at 4 CP, then I'd be guaranteed to waste at least 1. Because unless I crit strike, it's going to go 1 over, as mutilate gives a baseline of 2 CP gain, which means that I accidentally mutilated, or I potentially intentionally mutilated at 4 CP, meaning I wasted 1. But if you see a wasted of 1, you're generally okay. That's a very, very low number. If you're seeing that wasted much higher, at like 20 or 30 or something, during a fight, then there's something wrong. You want to be looking at that a lot. The next one is Seal Fate. Seal Fate is intertwined with Mutilate, and it's basically your Mutilate critical strikes. You can Mutilate, baseline of 2 CP, can go up to 3, and also 4. So if you take that example again that I just said, say you mutilate at 4 combo points, then if you mutilate again, you're guaranteed to waste 1. However, that has the potential to go up to 3 waste, which can add up quite quickly during a fight if you get somewhat lucky with those mutilate crits. In this case, I wasted 14 from Seal Fate, with a raw gain of 64 giving me a total gain of 50, which is generally okay. You're going to expect at least some Seal Fate wastage because of potential unlucky streaks, especially during your burst phase or during your opener in particular. You could potentially get periods where you mutilate to try and get that Vanish Rupture off, and those 2 mutilates are only 2 combo points, which means that you have a position where you can either Poison Knife or you can mutilate again, and neither situation is great to be put in. So you can either mutilate or you can Poison Knife, and then you're gonna get some waste somewhere in the system, Seeing a low number again is generally fine and good, but if you see this at 30, 40, again, you've got problems. That should never be happening, and you want to be actually paying attention to that. The rest are iffy. You just want to see them as close to 0 as you want: Garrote, Kingsbane, and Poison Knife. So now that I've touched upon that, I guess I can talk about the Casts Timelines tab, which is actually showing your entire rotation throughout the entire fight. But the main thing you want to be looking at during this is actually your opener. And the opener is important depending on your legendary. Now, I just want to preface this by saying this was done basically a few hours after I got the shoulder legendary. So this is not, I would not say that this is the default rotation for having mantle shoulders. So don't even, just ignore that completely. But this is a general rotation if you don't have shoulders. If you don't have shoulders, then you'd be doing something like this, and this is what I've been used to. You Garrot from stealth, mutilate, rupture, mutilate to 5 combo points, vanish, rupture again, then you Vendetta, mutilate Kingsbane, Envenom, mutilate, Envenom, mutilate, etc. Continue that throughout. And this is a general opener. This is the cookie cutter default opener that you usually see. I'll explain it very quickly. So essentially, Garrot from stealth means that it's going to be buffed by Night Stalker, the talent. You're mutilating and your rupture. This can potentially be 3 CP if you don't have the legendary shoulders like I did. But this is probably 3 CP. If you don't, it could potentially be more if you crit. But at the very minimum, this is going to be a 3 CP rupture. You're going to mutilate all the way up to 5 combo points, which means that this rupture, when you do this rupture, this is going to be Night Stalker buffed by the Vanish, because you're in Vanish. And it's also going to gain the effect of Pandemic Refresh. And what this means is this rupture here is going to have its duration extended by roughly 7 seconds or so, which means that this Night Stalker buff rupture is actually 30 seconds of Night Stalker buffed rupture, which is huge, as that's a long time for it to be 50% buffed. And that's one of the reasons that you do this opener. Next is the Vendetta. Again, your energy back, mutilate Kingsbane, and when the Kingsbane comes, immediately you Envenom, and then you sustain this Envenom throughout, as you want that high uptime of Envenom, as it basically improves your chance of poison application by, I believe it's 30%. And you want this because this ramps the Kingsbane applications up, thereby ramping the Kingsbane damage up, which is exactly what you want. This opener is just it's just an opener. I'll probably do a video at some point discussing different openers, but I just wanted to actually show you the tab to actually see what this opener tab actually looks like, see what the cast tab is actually looking like. So this is not the best rotation, this is not the worst rotation, but if it's logical and coherent in its form, then you know they're doing something at least somewhat organized. If you see abilities cast all over the place, and you see, like, I don't know, a 3-point Envenom or whatever, you know something's wrong, and you want to be looking at that kind of element. The next and last thing that I want to be looking at in terms of an indicator of performance is something I actually set up earlier, queued up Blue Peter, and is actually looking at that thing that I just said. So I'm at some point during this rotation, I have no idea, like 40 seconds or something, but I'm going into my Kingsbane window, and you can see an indication of performance right here. And you can see the Kingsbane on the 3rd row, and the Envenom on the 2nd, and the important thing to note is that this Envenom, for the majority of this Kingsbane, is overlapped with this Kingsbane, and the reason that's important is because, again, you want this to be continually clipping the Envenom for the entire duration of the Kingsbane, for the poison application chance, as well as the fact that a finisher gives you this thing called Surge of Toxins. And because you're using the Agonizing Poison talent, Surge of Toxins interacts with this talent by basically adding on percentage damage to Agonizing Poison from Surge of Toxins. So say you've got a 5 CP Envenom, Surge of Toxins will be at 10%, which would add on to the Agonizing Poison buff, therefore making your abilities hit harder. And it's as simple as that. And clipping these Envenoms so that once it reaches the end of its duration on the Surge of Toxins, you refresh that Envenom, then you're fine. You're given the best possible chance of actually maintaining that buff throughout the entire period and your maximum damage that you can possibly make. So seeing a long period of Envenom during your Kingsbane is something that you want to be looking out for, and you don't really want to be seeing like patches of Envenoms here, like, because that shows that you're actually going into into Kingsbane with very little energy, which is not something that you want to be doing. You want to be going into Kingsbane with a lot of energy, or as high energy as you can possibly make it, while keeping your Envenom times high. And this is something throughout the entire rotation, not just in the opener, but throughout every single burst phase that you have. And it's very important to actually take note of. So yeah, those are the main things I actually talked about. The uptimes, your resources, making sure you're not having no waste, making sure you're not energy capping, making sure you're making full advantage of that Kingsbane, Envenom, Burst window. Those are the main things that you look out for in Assassination Rogue. There are obviously more general things you can actually be looking at. Again, you can see these in the buffs. Something like the Potion of the Old War, making sure they're actually using a pre-pot, making sure they're using a second pot as well, and also making sure they're using the correct pot for their class. In the case of Assassination Rogue, that's Old War, unless you have the Braces, where it would be Prolonged Power for the 30% execute phase, and Old War for the beginning. Again, these are more general cases. You could probably find another resource for that, but I've covered the majority of the actual Assassination Rogue particular things that you should be looking out for in a log, so I hope that helped somewhat for people out there. So yeah, if you enjoyed this, I'll probably be doing some more videos based around the different legendaries, different openers, and other cool kind of log analysis stuff that you can actually be looking at. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you have a great day / rest of the evening.